I'm making my neck out of flamed maple. This neck blank here is about 1 1/64 inches thick. It really only needs to be something like 13/16 thick. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this through my planer to roughly get it to the size I need. I can almost guarantee that there's going to be some tear out, and so I don't want to go to my full thickness using this tool. But this will help me get in the right ballpark so that I can, prep this for further cutting. So I actually got really lucky. There's almost no tear out in this board. It's now 3/4 of an inch thick, and that'll be perfectly fine. So what I'll do next is I'll draw a center line on this, and then draw out my template that I'm going to use to design my neck. I didn't film it yesterday, but I created a neck template using my StewMac. I guess this is a 56 Stratocaster template, along with my own headstock that I designed in Inkscape. And so what I ended up doing was just drawing this out on a piece of MDF, and I'll link to the other video that I have about creating templates with MDF. So what I did was I drew this out here. I swapped in my own headstock. You can see possibly on the video, this headstock is essentially strat shaped, but it's obviously different. And so I drew those two on there, used my bandsaw to cut this out, and then ended up using the router to route around the edges here. And so what this effectively has done is made sure that I have a standard strat fretboard width across the neck, and then the headstock area doesn't matter as much. But the holes do pretty much line up. And so this should work with standard Strat hardware, but be my own design. So now that I've planed the neck blank down to 3/4 or approximately 13/16, I can draw a center line now, which I'll use then to transfer my template, and then we'll be able to route out the edges of the neck. Here I'm using I bought a fancy center finding ruler for, I don't know, maybe $10, $12 on Amazon. One side is just a standard ruler. On the top side here, you actually put on the center. And so if you want to find the center of a board, you just line it up so each edge is equidistant from the center, and that's how you know. And so, did I need to buy this? Probably not, but I've got it now, and it is actually pretty helpful. Easy as that. So now I have my center line. I can put my MDF template on, move it around just to kind of see where the neck would fall relative to any defects or anything. And then I can go ahead over to my bandsaw and actually start to cut this out. Alright, off to the bandsaw. I jumped the gun a little bit. I was so in a hurry to cut this out with the bandsaw, I ignored that that's actually not the next step. The next step here is I'm going to use this StewMac template to mark off where the nut is, and then I'm going to mark where the truss rod is going to go. I'm actually going to route the truss rod channel first, so if I make any mistakes, I can potentially move it around or do something. So I'll route the channel first, then I'll cut the outline, then I'll route around to get the final neck shape. On a fender style neck, the edge of the truss rod sits inside a little channel underneath essentially where the nut of the guitar is. And so what we can do is, I'm using a hot rod truss rod from Stu Mac, is line this up on our template so that we can mark off from what distance we need to route out the channel. And so once we have that in place, then I can go to the router table with the 1/4 inch bit, take light passes with the blank squared up against the fence, and hopefully get a perfectly routed center channel. So now the neck blank is properly marked up. So now I'll move over to the router table and start lining up for the truss rod channel. So I have my router table set up for the shallowest of passes with a 1/4 inch bit with no bearing. And so what I've done is set the fence so that approximately the middle line hits the board. Let's see if I can show that here. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is do a plunge cut to bring the bit down. The bit will start cutting at the first line that I've marked here. And I've used a square to make sure this is lined up. And so in theory, what I'm going to do is put my beginning line on this line here, and then I'm going to go all the way down the neck blank to this second line here, and then pull the neck blank upwards. And so what we'll do is we'll have the channel routed down the middle of the board without the channel going all the way through. And since I have such a light cut here, if I happen to make a mistake of some sort, I'll be able to see before I go too deep, so that I can adjust the fence if I have to. So you can see I actually drifted off center quite considerably. I started from the center here. The bit went exactly where I expected the beginning of the plunge. But by the end of the plunge, I'm actually on the other side of the center line. And so this is why it takes such a shallow plunge to start off, is this will give me an opportunity to go back, make sure I'm really square to the table, make sure everything is in line before I cut a much deeper channel. Being down, I guess this is maybe like a 16th or even a 32nd of an inch. It looks a little bit sloppy, but it's not going to affect this at all. The channel will be well deep enough that the truss rod won't move around. So I'll go back and fix this, do this a couple more times, and then I'll have my truss rod channel. Even though I did a miscut on the first one, I've been able to even it out more towards the center. So I've gone most of the way down, and so now I can use the truss rod to actually see where it is. The whole point of this is, if you use the truss rod and you go at it slowly, you can figure out how to make this exactly the right size without going too far. Take your time and take small passes, and that will also keep you from destroying the board in any way. So here, looks like I have a little bit more to go. So I'll keep at it, and then when I'm done, be able to cut the edges off the board and start to shape it. And that should do it. You can see the truss rod is perfectly flush on this end. Here the nut is sticking out a little bit, so what I need to do is just trim this briefly with a chisel, and then it should fit nice and flush. 5 minutes with my 1/4 inch chisel, and this is probably as good a fit as I've ever done. See, through the length here, at this edge, it's popping up because the truss rod is essentially one big spring. So it's at the proper level here. When I put the fretboard on, it will obviously be pushing this down for good when I glue it. And the same thing up at the top here. It's nice and flush right at the neck, the base of the neck here. And so, as I mentioned, you can see my miscut is a little bit noticeable here, but it's not going to matter. Obviously, once I glue the fretboard on, you'll never see it. And functionally, the rest of the truss rod channel is deep enough where this won't make any practical effect. So now I can actually go and trim off all the excess around my around the neck outline, and then go ahead and route it out and be finished with my neck blank. Ever since I had that router kickback incident, I've tried to be really cognizant about how much material I leave before I do the routing. And so you can see here, zoom in a little bit, I'm just barely on the outside of the template here on the bandsaw. You're talking, in some places, probably a 1/16 of an inch. Up here is a little bit further away, but even still not that far. And so hopefully, when I route this out here, I'll have a much easier time without any kickbacks or any other craziness. Other than some minor burning on the edges, routing out the template, there's nothing happened. And so, of course, that was the hope, that was expected. And so now what I'm going to do is just clean up the edges a little bit with my spindle sander. And then I'll put the truss rod in, and I'll glue the fretboard down. And then after the glue is dried, I'm going to use this edge now as my pattern edge to trim the fretboard, so that when I'm done, everything is perfectly smooth and flush to itself. Just a minute or two on the spindle sander. All the burn marks are taken off the side now. And so I'm ready to take the fretboard, obviously put the truss rod in first, put the fretboard down, glue it up, and then leave it overnight to cure.